mRNA vaccines are being researched, but there is not an approved cattle mRNA vaccine.
It's Dr. Lou Strickland with the University of Tennessee. My guest today as we discuss mRNA vaccine technology.
We can't just run out there and, oh, hey, this looks like a great medicine. Let's use it on these animals.
It's yet another sticky subject in our cattle industry. So we're going to talk about what it is, how it differs from our current vaccine technology, what advantages does it potentially have, concerns from the industry, as well as what challenges it may have in developing. And we'll also address this specific false narrative.
Just because it says it's an mRNA vaccine doesn't mean it's the COVID vaccine.
I'm not necessarily for or against mRNA vaccine, but I do want to know more. So join us on today's episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And this is the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Thanks for joining us here on the program today. Yeah, as you heard there in the opening, we're going to be looking at this topic and the subject of mRNA vaccine. And there's a lot of just not necessarily some unknowns, I guess you want to say, in it with it. And I think that's where some of these questions are coming from. We're going to look at it a little bit here further today, so be sure to stick around for that. Also, of course, later on in the show, meteorologist Don Day will be in as we take a look at our long-term weather. And of course, the Captain Tim O'Byrne in this week with this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents. Now, something I did want to point out as we are heading into the fall of the year, we've done a lot of shows here on the Working Ranch Radio Show that have topics that are relevant to this time of the year. And while that might have been a show we did a year or 2 years ago, we do them in such a way that I think they have a lot of life left in them. So I encourage you to go back and listen to maybe some other shows that we've had here on our program before. You can find them by going to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com, or if you have a preferred podcast app that you like to listen to as well, you can find that library of shows on there. Now, something I might just point out here more recently, and it was a show that we did a while back, and it was in regards to the use of TMR mixers. That's something that as we're getting into looking ahead into the next coming months, and folks are beginning to wean calves and maybe background calves, and you've got a TMR mixer and maybe you've had it for a few years, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that show because we did talk about that, and I think you'll find some of the elements that we talked with that show quite useful. In fact, that was episode 177, things to consider on using TMR mixers, and that was back in August. But all in all, some other shows that we've had, we'll continue to do shows this fall that are relevant to our fall work for a lot of us. I know for us, we've already got calves preconditioned. Other folks, you're probably weaning by now. Nevertheless, all of us finding ourselves in that fall work period of time. And for us, it's nice to have a little bit of cooler weather in the mornings and things get started. We could sure do without the wind that we've had, but nevertheless, it is what it is. And according to meteorologist Don Day, in regards to a previous show we had with him, in fact, if you had tuned back on episode 182 that we did in middle of September, that was meteorologist Don Day's winter weather outlook for this fall and winter of 2025. He'd indicated that the fall of this year was going to be fairly mild for most of us, and so we are seeing that so far, but we'll probably see something change at some point as we approach more into the winter months. With that in mind, let's turn to our subject at hand here today. Joining us here on the program today is Dr. Lou Strickland. He is the extension veterinarian for the University of Tennessee. And Dr. Strickland, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin.
Well, we're circling back to a topic that really came to light. It was, I think, in the spring of 2023 when there was some false information come out regarding the use of mRNA vaccine in cattle. And so that really kind of brought this whole topic up a little bit to the point to where I know you'd put some information out there that, this isn't happening.
Correct. That is correct. The way that I actually found out about it, we have an extension system here in the state of Tennessee where we got a county agent in every county. And actually, one of the county agents contacted me. He sent me a video of I don't know who this person was. They were before some sort of committee carrying on about how cattlemen are required to vaccinate with an mRNA vaccines in our cattle, blah, blah, blah. And of course, complete falsehood. And that's when I put out some of my information, saying, yeah, mRNA vaccines are being researched, but there is not an approved cattle mRNA vaccine.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about that, just a little bit further, and let's describe for folks what it is. What is an mRNA vaccine? And of course, those are all acronyms because M stands for messenger, and then RNA, of course, is ribonucleic acid. So let's go through and first describe, what is it?
Okay, just to go over and just kind of differentiate real quick between vaccines, our conventional vaccines, which have been used for decades, are vaccines that have to be cultured. Whatever pathogen that the producer or veterinarian wants that animal protected against, that pathogen has to be cultured. That takes time. And then that's put into the vaccine that's given to the animal. The animal then has an immune response to it and builds antibodies. Well, with an mRNA vaccine it's quicker to be able to develop because they can simply take a subunit of that pathogen and then it's put into the vaccine. And then what that does, as it goes into the system, the cells inside, whatever animal you're trying to protect, have the messenger RNA. And they go out and they see this subunit. And messenger RNA is very, very similar to a carpenter or a contractor. They're given a blueprint. Okay, then they take that blueprint and they go build something by that blueprint. Well, that's exactly what mRNA does. It's basically a blueprint that tells that mRNA, okay, here's a subunit of a pathogen. I need to build some antibodies against it. It goes out there and builds the antibodies, and then the mRNA is gone. It's done. His job is done. He's over. I'm completely gone away. So that's what an mRNA vaccine is. And the advantage of this mRNA vaccine is that it can be built in a short amount of time, as opposed to the conventional vaccines, which have to be cultured over months.
Okay. Now, of course, when we talk about mRNA vaccines, that really came to light, when we went through the pandemic because the COVID vaccines being an mRNA type vaccine. And I think that's where some of the concern that people have is regarding that all of that came together so fast that not quite sure what the repercussions would be for the uses of that.
Yes. And I think that's where a lot of people have concerns in that they think it's the COVID vaccine. I've had some people even tell me they think that because some people wouldn't take mRNA vaccine or COVID vaccine, they're going to give it to the cattle and then you consume it. So there's a lot of misinformation that's going on out there. I can easily see where people get concerned thinking that that's what's going on, but that is not what is going on at all. So once again, the misinformation gets out there, people get all concerned, but that is not what's going on. It is simply being able to come up with a vaccine that is a quickly produced vaccine that can protect our food supply because there's foreign animal diseases that we do not want in this country. And swine flu is actually in the Caribbean right now, and we don't want that in here because it's something we've never had before, and that could easily wipe out our entire food supply real fast. So that's why research is going on to be able to develop these vaccines so that it can be quickly implemented if we do see that problem here in the States.
You talked about the swine component of that, and it is actually being used in the swine industry. Am I correct?
That is correct. The swine industry does have an approved mRNA vaccine that can be used in swine. So that is in place. I think that's been in place for 4 or 5 years now, since about 2018 or 19, somewhere along in there.
Just real quick with that one, because I'm sure that's some element of a precursor to what we're going to see in other meat industries. As far as the study with that and the research on that for the swine industry, explain what you know on that.
Okay, as far as I know, what they have in the swine industry is they've got these mRNA vaccines developed, and what they can do is let's go back to what we originally talked about, where they can take that very specific subunit of a pathogen they want to control against. So they already have that developed where they have these very specific subunits already in place. They're able to use these vaccines, but it's not like it's widespread use. It's only in situations where it's necessary. So it's not one of those we just reach and grab it all the time. It's only when it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take a break here. And when we come back in the next segment, we're going to continue talking. Our subject is on mRNA vaccine. And my guest is Dr. Lou Strickland with the University of Tennessee. And coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk specifically about some of the concerns that we're hearing coming out of the industry on the use of mRNA vaccine. As we head to break, it's a good time to go refresh the coffee cup as well. And if you're searching and looking for a new type of coffee that you want to try out and you support somebody at the same time who's also in the cow business just like you and I, check out Cowpuncher Coffee. Jim and Tricia Williams, and of course their kid in charge, Miss Olivia. They've got several different flavors, varieties, whether you like whole bean, whether you want it ground, flavored coffee. They got the K-Cups as well. And if you're not sure, check their sampler package as well. Take a look for yourself. You can go to their website at cowpunchercoffee.com. Grab a mug. Let's spur the day with Cowpuncher Coffee. This segment today brought to you by Zoetis. Back your instincts and feel more confident in your replacement selection this fall with Inherent Select from Zoetis. Visit beefgenetics.com/working ranch to get started.
Build a better herd with genomic EPDs for your commercial females. A cattleman is only as good as his tools. So add Inherent Select from Zoetis to your shoot side lineup to back your intuition and to help reveal the replacements with the potential to be the most productive and profitable in your herd. Keep the best. Sell the rest. Zoetis makes it easy. Order free supplies today so you can easily collect tissue samples when you work cattle this fall. Visit beefgenetics.com/working ranch to get started.
You know, as you flip through social media, you see a lot of ranch land for sale. And for those in the market wanting to buy, that's a good thing that you have that ability to see that. But if you're a ranch family that it's on the selling side of that transaction, the thought that goes through my head is, what I wonder is, did they want to sell, or was that the only option that they were presented? Yeah, it's a complicated set of circumstances for any outfit when it comes to looking at that as an option, but wouldn't you just like to sit across the table and explore some other options with someone? Well, 78 years ago, Henry Hall and his son Warren founded Hall Mortgage Company, and they built a relationship with hardworking ranchers all across the country by providing solid and trusting advice that was guided by a principle of integrity. Now, today we know them as Hall & Hall, and nothing has changed, though, with how they work with folks. Yeah, they do broker real estate throughout the United States and Canada. For buyers, they can also provide long-term financing. But whether either side of that transaction that you might be on, they do offer services above and beyond what most regular brokerage firms offer. And really at the heart of that is this. They want to see land stay in production agriculture, which is why they want to help with ranch management personnel, assisting with management of day-to-day operations, and even helping to draft leases. Since 1946, Hall & Hall has been dedicated to land and landowners. And if you're at a point where you're ready to just sit down and talk with somebody about the future of your land asset, or even just brainstorm some options, I'd encourage you to reach out to the folks at Hall & Hall. They've got folks scattered all across the country. You can head to their website at hallandhall.com for more information. Well, as we get back into our subject today, we are talking on mRNA vaccines. And my guest today is Dr. Lou Strickland, who is the extension veterinarian for the University of Tennessee. And our topic today is on mRNA vaccine. Of course, as I said earlier, mRNA is an acronym that stands for messenger ribonucleic acid vaccines. And Dr. Strickland, let's go a little bit further into this subject, because I know there's concerns within the industry because we've not yet seen enough research yet regarding, residual or anything of that nature. Not saying it's there or that it's not there, other than just the fact that it's still a ways off. And while the USDA, there have been research on this for many, many years, for a lot of folks, just not quite feeling comfortable yet with where we're at in being okay with this.
Yeah, and I get it. I get it through the misconceptions, misinformation. But here's something that I like to always point out. As you just mentioned, research has been going on with this for probably close to a decade. It's been going on for a while. And here's what I like to make sure everybody understands. We can't just run out there and, hey, this looks like a great medicine. Let's use it on these animals. We can't do that. We have to go through a stepwise process to where that medication, that vaccine, anything we use on that food producing animal has been approved by the USDA and the FDA. And for that to happen, it has to be proven that, number one, the vaccine's effective. Number two, the vaccine is safe for the animal and also for us if we consume that, animal that it's been given to. And also, there has to be a withdrawal period established. And this is some confusion too. Not a lot of people understand what withdrawal period is. So a withdrawal period is when I give a medication or a vaccine, there has to be an amount of time that passes by before that animal can be processed. In other words, testing is done to make sure that the amounts of any medication, any vaccine, anything are down to a negligible level to where it's maybe not even detected anymore, but certainly detected at a level that's safe for human consumption. And so all of that research is still going on. So I wouldn't hold my breath that it's going to happen anytime soon. Plus, after all that happens, then it's got to be approved by the USDA, so literally an act of Congress. So I don't expect it anytime soon, but I do expect it maybe within the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back later on in our show, and we're going to circle back to the USDA approval just a bit. But before we get there, I want to specifically talk back about the product itself, because there are some issues with physically the vaccine itself, as we saw with the COVID vaccines that were an mRNA vaccine as well. Just in the fact of there's some challenges there regarding cost and thermal stability. Talk about those a bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's another good point that you're bringing up there, because that is a big concern right now too, of being able to even develop this vaccine. Can we keep it stable enough? Because this, as you just said, they are extremely vulnerable to changes in temperature. It has to be kept at a very specific temperature for it even to be effective anymore. And that's any vaccine. Our conventional vaccines are a little bit more forgiving in our temperature ranges, but they still have to be kept at a very specific temperature range for them to still be effective for the animal. And of course, I preach that all the time to our producers. You're spending a bunch of money on this vaccine that you're giving to these animals. You certainly want to make sure that you store it properly and that you're using it properly chute side. So that's going to be a big challenge in developing this mRNA vaccine to where it's stable enough to where I can carry it out in the field and use it like I need to. Let's go back to the swine vaccine. It's called Sequivity. The way that we raise swine now is a lot more controlled temperature and environment-wise than it is cattle. Cattle, oh my goodness, you can be, okay, let's take, for instance, where you are, Justin. Oh my goodness, it can be down in the low 20s when you're out there working cows and wind chill of -10, or it can here in Tennessee. I could be out there, oh my goodness, that's 98 degrees and 98% relative humidity. It's going to be miserable. So being able to develop this vaccine where it's going to be stable in these changing temperatures that we have to deal with is going to be a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. The cost of it, as far as that goes, did we talk about that?
I have not talked about the cost because of it still being in the research stages. I really don't have any idea of what the cost is going to be now. Sort of like any other vaccine when it first comes out, or any other medication when it first comes out, that price is going to be higher and will eventually work its way down as it's proven to be working and I'm able to use it out in the field like it needs to, and extra studies, research study trials and everything going on. That cost will come down, but when it first comes out, it's probably going to be a little pricey.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the institutions that are doing the studies. I know USDA has some grant-funded research going on. Who are you familiar with doing those studies?
The only one that I know for 100% sure is Iowa State. I am not familiar with any other institutions that may be doing. I'm sure there are, but I've just simply not looked to see exactly who is doing that research.
Mm-hmm. As we had talked about and referred, this has been going on for many, many years where they've been researching this. And maybe you've already addressed this a bit, but what are you hearing besides what we've already talked about that's relevant to us as ranchers?
I think going right back to what we've already talked about is this is going to be a vaccine that can be rapidly developed and rapidly used if we have an outbreak. As far as the efficacy on this vaccine, I think there are some pretty good numbers right now as far as showing how efficient that it may be. But as far as still going back to that safety and the thermal stability issue is our biggest challenge right now. And that's basically everything that I've heard out of research and industry right now.
Mm-hmm. What are you hearing as far as worldwide industry? The only thing I could kind of come up with is, of course, Australia is another country that's really looking at this. I don't think they've approved anything yet, but are they on the precipice of doing something like that?
I think they're in the same situation as us. Research has been going on. They're kind of at that brink of turning it loose because they've got just an astronomical number of small ruminant sheep in that country where that vaccine could be used if there was some sort of outbreak. So I think we're kind of in the same area. Studies in Europe going on, still looking at that. I've not read an extreme amount of papers from Europe as far as where they are. Once again, they're looking at the safety issue as well, just like us.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting you talk about Europe because it seems like they're even more protective, or I don't want to say that in the wrong way. I don't mean necessarily protective, but they're more cautious, I should say.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, with some of this kind of stuff. So it's interesting that there's some consideration there.
Yeah. And I'm in the same type thing, protecting their food supplies.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's take another break here. And when we come back, we're going to continue to talk more on this mRNA vaccines. My guest today is Dr. Lou Strickland. He is the extension veterinarian for the University of Tennessee. This segment today brought to you by the American Gelbvieh Association. Meet modern industry demands for feedlots and carcass traits with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics. Find out more at gelbvieh.org.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Dr. Lou Strickland from the University of Tennessee, and our discussion today is looking at just getting basically more educated on what mRNA vaccines are. Most everybody in the beef industry or ag industry, the industry groups, are definitely in a little bit of a holding pattern on that. Some definitely very much against the use of this in the industry. Others just wanting to see a little bit more research before we move any further on that. And Dr. Strickland, let's talk about one of the questions that you've gotten quite a bit, and it has come up regarding the concerns of mRNA vaccines, and that is, does it change the DNA composition of the animal?
You are correct. That is a question I've gotten quite a bit, and I think there's a lot of concern over that. I want to kind of go back and hammer on exactly what mRNA does. It's that messenger that comes from the cell. It's given instructions to go do what it's supposed to do, and then it's gone. It literally creates that subunit or creates those antibodies that the immune system can then respond to if they see that pathogen down the road. But this does not change the DNA composition of the animal. It just simply gives that mRNA instructions on what to go do. It goes and does it, and then the mRNA goes away. It's done. It's gone. It's done its job. But there is no DNA change whatsoever in that animal.
Mm-hmm. We talked about it first or second segment, and some of the concern in this, and we talked about it. I don't want to necessarily rehash that conversation again, but really some of the concern industry-wide and people-wise, food safety-wise, is that mRNA vaccines is the same as the COVID vaccine. And to this point in time, as we are now 2024, and that was back 3 or 4 years ago, there's still some uncertainty in the industry of just what effect those vaccines had on humans, and now we're talking animals.
Exactly, and that's why I think the research has got to continue to make sure exactly what's going on. We just talked about being able to have an approved medication. So that research has got to keep going. And something else we need to make sure that people understand real fast too is just because it says it's an mRNA vaccine doesn't mean it's the COVID vaccine. mRNA is the type of vaccine. And then I can take that mRNA vaccine and then take the subunit of that pathogen that I want to control and put it into that mRNA vaccine. So what was done with COVID was they took the mRNA technology and they plugged in the COVID subunit into it. Let's just say they want to make an mRNA vaccine that controls, I'm just going to say, bovine viral diarrhea virus. So what they'll do is they'll take that subunit out of that BVD virus and plug it into the mRNA technology. So the vaccine is just technology. It doesn't mean that it's the COVID vaccine.
Mm-hmm. You hit on something I want to just kind of maybe go a little bit further on, and that is, what's sort of driving behind this, and that is, as you mentioned there, specific diseases. Let's hit some of them that really are the big targets that they're looking at with this type of vaccine technology.
We have diseases that we've kept out of the United States that have been eradicated for decades that we do not want back in here. And I'm just going to pick foot and mouth disease because that's one that's been eradicated for decades. And that's one that the USDA is constantly monitoring our borders, our food supply to make sure that does not come back into the United States. And that's where, that's what we talked about earlier, is if all of a sudden somehow that got in, we would be able to develop that mRNA technology vaccine for foot and mouth to quickly vaccinate our animals to protect our food supply. Because, oh my goodness, if you think the price of beef is high right now, you let foot and mouth disease come in here and multiple, as in millions of animals have to be destroyed because of it. That's going to drive our food supply sky high, and our food safety is going to be really an issue there if that happens. So that's why they're studying this technology to where there can be quick protection if need be.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Strickland, as you were talking about that, it brings to mind we've kind of got two issues sort of coming head to head regarding this topic in general, because we can say, well, we need to develop this vaccine for these diseases that could enter in the country, yet at the same time, there's a lot of folks in the industry saying, well, we need to control the borders too. We need to control the cattle or the imports and that kind of stuff coming in. So we have two issues kind of coming into this particular deal. And those that are definitely far and against this type of vaccine would say, we really need to get a better control on our imports and labeling. And then at the same time, then, the others that may be a little bit more open to the vaccine technology. I guess you see the dynamic that I'm talking about here. And we've kind of got two different issues, totally maybe unrelated, but related.
I think I would call it more related than unrelated. I often talk about biosecurity when I'm out talking to producers. I do quite a bit of cattlemen meetings where I go out and talk to cattlemen groups. And biosecurity is always a big topic that I always like to bring up. And I often use the adage, if you don't want to fall in the ditch, well, stay away from the ditch. So a big challenge that we have right now, and I get both sectors exactly what they're saying. Better protection for our borders, better biosecurity, having this vaccine technology, but they're both management tools to put in our management toolbox. And one big problem that we have, and we're working on this, is our shortage of food animal veterinarians right now. Students that come out of 4 years of veterinary training that just simply don't want to go into food animal practice. And I get it. It's a rough lifestyle. They have a high debt load when they come out. They're looking for that job that's going to be the easiest job possible, that's going to pay me the highest salary possible so I can pay my school loans off, pay my debt off. So it's a big challenge right now of being able to maintain the border like we're talking about, because I'm sure that USDA they're probably stretched thin too with having enough people to do that kind of thing. So I think that's something that we certainly always need to keep in mind. I think this is something else we need to keep in mind is to, as producers, make sure you're staying in contact with your congressmen, your senators. Make sure that they understand what challenges we're facing right now. I realize they've got a lot of stuff thrown at them, but boy, just let our food supply go by the wayside, and I promise you everything else will go by the wayside, because everybody's going to be concerned about our food supply. So stay in contact with those congressmen, those senators, telling them, hey, we need to do something about our food protection, our border protection through veterinarians, and having enough veterinarians to be able to do that, and being able to help these young graduates coming out of vet school to be able to go into that field of work where they can protect our food supply and actually, and do education with producers as well.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Strickland, you hit something there that I've heard in my conversations with the captain, Tim O'Byrne, who's editor of Working Ranch Magazine. He had expressed to me one time a huge concern that we're seeing in our industry is what you just said. And we're completely in some ways off of the topic of mRNA vaccines, but that is the shortage of veterinarians, large animal veterinarians in our industry. And so from that standpoint, one of the conversations that come up is, what could be done to address that from the educational institution standpoint?
Yeah, there are several programs that are out there. The biggest one that I'm familiar with is the Veterinary Loan Repayment Program. And that's where if a recent graduate will come out and will go to a deficient area, where it's needed, whether that be in Wyoming, Tennessee, the border, food protection, whatever. If you'll promise to go in that area and you'll work in that area 3 to 5 years, they'll pay a big chunk of your loans off. There's other programs that are looking at tax incentives where you won't be charged taxes. So there's several incentive programs that are out there that are encouraging these young veterinarians to go into needed areas. And I realize you made that comment, we're getting away from mRNA vaccines, but still, that's part of it. If we can do that protection of our food supply, protection and education, we can prevent this before we even get to the need of a vaccine. But that vaccine is still certainly another management tool we can put in our toolbox to protect our animals. I got this statement from somewhere. I don't know where in my training, but poor management will overcome the best medications every time. In other words, if I've got poor management, I'm not providing the proper nutrition that they need. They're in a dirty environment. Just because I give a vaccine to them doesn't mean that they will be protected against all those pathogens that are in that poor management. So not only do we need that mRNA vaccine or even our conventional vaccines for protection, we still got to do something about it. We still got to have proper biosecurity, proper animal health, proper management to make those vaccines efficient to do what they're made to do. Just because I give a cow, a sheep or a swine or whatever, a vaccine, an mRNA vaccine, doesn't make them ironclad. Mm-hmm. They still can be overcome by pathogens.
Mm-hmm. You bet.
And something else I want to explain real quick too. The statement I just said, a vaccine does not make an animal ironclad. All a vaccine does is reduce clinical signs. So you may have an animal that might get a little bit sick. They just won't die like they would if they didn't have that vaccine.
Okay. All right, well, let's take another break here. We've got one more segment with Dr. Strickland, and when we do that, we're just going to kind of wrap our conversation up in general. I've got one more question, a little bit more about the approval through the USDA and the FDA and that process, that concept, and mentally from an industry standpoint, how we accept that or look at that. So we'll continue on after the break. This segment brought to you by Barn Owl. Real-time awareness starts here. Always know with Barn Owl, build your off-grid camera system today at barnowl.com. Are you tired of putting the wear and tear on your ranch pickup or your good side-by-side out checking stock tanks or reservoirs? Or maybe it's just keeping an eye on a remote ranch location. When you stop and you think about it and you start to calculate the cost of your time, fuel, and miles on your vehicles, you're going to scare yourself. But there really is a very simple and a reassuring solution, and it's called Barn Owl. Barn Owl off-grid cameras and smart alerts provide you that assurance, and there's no question it is a time and a money saver. From anywhere at any time, no Wi-Fi or power needed. Build your off-grid camera system today at barnowl.tech. Real-time awareness starts here. Always know with Barn Owl. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Dr. Lou Strickland with the University of Tennessee. He is their extension veterinarian. And Dr. Strickland, we've went through great discussion already in our show here today about mRNA vaccines. And as we wrap up this conversation, kind of bring it to a finality in some point, one of the things that you had talked about is the fact, first of all, there is no mRNA vaccine that is approved for the use in cattle right now. We know that. We've already talked about that. But we do know that they are working on that. And one of the concerns is, or one of the things is that we do know that it's going to have to go through FDA approval. It then has to be approved by the USDA. With that in mind, for some folks in the industry and for people in general, that's not good enough because there's just a mistrust in our, really not just in our industry, in our society.
Yeah, correct. We have a lot of misinformation that's out there. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier or not, but a lot of times people's emotions will overcome science every time. It doesn't matter how much science that I throw out there, those emotions will still be there, and I cannot overcome those emotions with my science. It's just a matter of fact of life with everybody. They'll have that mistrust. Something else that's a big nemesis of ours is social media. A lot of misinformation can be put out there on social media. I'm not quite sure why just anybody can throw something on social media and it immediately trumps my 11 years of training in veterinary medicine. Mm-hmm. So, and even research. I typically don't get the mistrust, but in another way, I understand it.
Yeah. Well, and part of it too is there's been things happen, as we specifically talk about the USDA. I mean, there's been things that's happened in whose administration or in whose industry group's pocket are they in? It would be the question, would be the concern.
And that's a concern that I've received too when I initially sent out the article is, just when I would explain the approval process and I received calls and emails back going, well, Big Pharma has USDA in their pocket. I don't believe that. I know a lot of people do, but it's just one of those processes that, we do have to put our trust into that process that it goes through to make sure, because those folks that are in the USDA or the FDA, they have families, members that they're consuming the same product too as we would be.
Mm-hmm. So as we look at this and wrap this up a little bit, for us as ranchers, and you say, okay, the emotional aspect versus the scientific data on that, how do you advise us as ranchers to look at this, not just this, but as, this isn't the first of other new technology that's going to come down. But as we look at this, especially when it becomes to our food supply, how do we look at this and try to kind of keep the left and the right out of this and us mentally approach these subjects?
Yeah, that is a great question on being able to keep that loud voice coming from either side yelling at you. I think in these situations, you've got to basically seek out that individual that is trained. And I'm going to kind of put in a pitch for your veterinarian here. You're a veterinarian that is trained in those areas that will not have a bias one way or the other. That they are able to look at the scientific research and go, okay, these are the papers that have been put out there. And also something else I think that's really important is to have a trained individual that is able to read the research and go, yes, this research is sound, and this research is not so sound. I actually conduct a continuing education conference for veterinarians, and often we'll have individuals in here that are basically training our veterinarians to learn how to evaluate research projects, research papers that come out to go, oh yeah, this is sound and this is not so sound, and to be able to weed through that.
Mm-hmm. Several years ago, I attended a leadership summit, and I don't remember who wrote the book on it now, but the author was, one of the points in his book was to think gray. And when I look at these type of subjects that are very controversial, and it is tough sometimes to keep the right and the left off your shoulder and go into a subject in the middle and trying to think through that. But that really is one of the things, if we could see more of that happening in our industry, we might see a little more resolution and agreement together as well.
I think so. Again, I do a little class for our animal science students, and these are students that want to go into veterinary medicine. And I do go out and find surveys, and I have seen that at least veterinarians are trusted more than lawyers. So,
That's good.
So still seeking out that individual you feel like you can trust and know that they've read your research and they feel pretty confident that they're reading sound research.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Dr. Strickland, thanks for joining us. Just some final comments from you before we head out here today.
As we've said, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I feel like mRNA technology is going to be safe, or it wouldn't have happened in the swine industry already. But it's still being studied in the beef world to make sure that that's going to be, as we talked about, a safe product for the animal, safe product for us, and that we can consume that animal or their byproduct safely.
You bet. Well, thanks for joining us again here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
You bet. And again, Dr. Lou Strickland from the University of Tennessee, our guest today as we look a little deeper at this topic of mRNA vaccine as we started the show or talked throughout the show. Definitely a little bit of not really controversy in the industry, but just waiting to see what this information is going to look like as it comes through and gets more research on it. And no doubt if it gets to the point where it moves forward and becomes a product that is being looked at for approval by the FDA and the USDA, I'm sure there will be more information that we'll need to explore and look at that particular time. We're going to take a break here. Coming up after the break, the Captain Tim O'Byrne will be in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents. And we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. This segment today brought to you by Tank Toad, your remote water monitoring, all from the convenience of your phone, powered by solar, satellite, and cell. Keep an eye on your water supply with a daily text message. To find out more, call Meadowlark Solutions today for tank monitors, well controllers, generators, and more at 801-252-6135 or online at tanktoad.com.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the weatherstationexperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. Justin, you and Mila must be very proud. This week, your son Chase graduates U.S. Army basic training at Fort Sill. And such an exciting honor. You get to see him on the grinder for the first time since he went into basic training. And it's just such a... I'm so proud of all of our ranch kids that have joined the military, and they go in with, I guess, that ranch kid can-do attitude. They've already got a lot of the basic skills that they need. And our ranching community obviously has been very patriotic right from the beginning. And I'm so proud to be a part of this community. And I wish Chase all the very best in his Army career. Back to you in the booth.
All right, thanks, Captain. Yeah, both Mila and I are very proud of Chase with his graduation here at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. And he was able to earn a promotion for himself as he was the highest score out of his battalion in the Army Combat Fitness Test. So he'll earn that promotion. We're proud of him for that. And he'll head next to his AIT, which will take him to the state of Arizona. But as you were talking a little bit there about just seeing our ranch kids that do go into the armed services and the military and serve our country, I think you're right. The fact that they do have a leg up, the responsibility that they've already had to go through in life and the expectations on them to get jobs done, work in tougher environments as well, I think does give them that ability. And it's not that basics is easy, but I do think they have a little bit of a leg up. Well, as we change directions here a little bit, meteorologist Don Day is standing by. And of course, Don, really in the news with weather has been the hurricane that took place down in the southeastern part of the country. So let's just start there. And what do you anticipate to see for the next 7 to 10 days out for that part of the country?
Well, it does look like we have to keep an eye on the Gulf of Mexico because it does look as though we're going to have more rain for Florida. We hope it doesn't get any further north, but parts of Georgia And a lot of the Gulf Coast region is going to have some active weather with showers, thunderstorms, and even possibly in the next week or so, another tropical storm, something to keep an eye on. Florida would be the area to watch out for. Elsewhere across the U.S., though, we're looking at another very quiet stretch of weather for any harvest operations ongoing across the Corn Belt, the Western Plains, the Central Plains. We just don't have much weather. Other than that very wet pattern in Florida and along the Gulf Coast, the rest of the lower 48 looking at very little weather. Now, we might by next weekend get a little bit of precipitation into parts of the southwestern United States with some shower and thunderstorm activity for the Four Corners region, maybe by next weekend. But for the Rockies, the Central High Plains, most of the West, the Southwest United States, it's going to be very sparse, Corn Belt included, in terms of getting any rain. While we're going to see some episodes of cooler weather, we still don't see a big cold outbreak as well.
Okay. So let's look a little further out. Let's look long-term into the end of this month, end of October, and into the 1st of November, where we've been pretty stagnant here lately. Are we going to see any change in that weather pattern?
Well, it does look like the pattern that's been pretty quiet, other than the southeastern United States, is going to continue here for a little bit longer. Now, we do see by next weekend some subtle changes, but nothing that would really upset the apple cart in terms of any much colder weather. Where we do things get a bit more interesting is going to be after, let's say, around the 18th to the 20th of October. We're expecting a shift in the weather pattern across the Central and North Pacific that's going to kind of unstuck, so to speak, the logjam that's been in the jet stream over a large part of the Pacific for the last several weeks. And that's been responsible for the warmer and drier than average conditions over a lot of the central and western United States. So it's going to be probably another 10 to 15 days. But once we get by that period, indications are, let's say around the 18th to the 20th, up through that Halloween week, I think we're going to see across a lot of North America a change to colder, more unsettled and wet weather, especially in the west and parts of the north central areas of the U.S.
Mm-hmm. So what about an update here on La Nina and what we're seeing for the water temperatures out in the Pacific?
We certainly see La Nina continuing across the subtropical Pacific, and the latest long-range outlook for the Pacific near the tropics there is for the La Nina to reach its peak strength over the next 60 days. So basically, as we get through November into early December, La Nina will start to fade. That is something that we have been talking about in terms of timing. So there's no big changes in terms of what La Nina is going to do, other than it's in place now, will be in place probably through December. With the La Nina in place and the changes that are going to happen later here in October, that does still lend credence to a colder winter pattern getting started, especially by November. And with La Nina fading by January, February, and March, that is a signal that the weather pattern is going to be active across North America, colder and more snowy than last winter. So some of the same things we've been talking about in terms of the long term, how La Nina is going to interact with things, and sea surface temperatures out in the North Pacific, all of that still is on the table, despite the very quiet, warm and dry weather that continues for the central and western United States. So a warm, dry pattern in the fall in the central and the west does not indicate that's how it's going to be as we get into that November, December, January timeframe. The exception, of course, is the southeast United States that still could be impacted by tropical activity here. We're still in hurricane and tropical storm season and will be through the month of October.
All right, Don, appreciate the update, and we look forward to talking to you next week. By the way, if you want to tune in each and every morning to meteorologist Don Day's weather forecast, you can find a link on his website at dayweather.com. Are you tired of putting the wear and tear on your ranch pickup, or your good side-by-side out checking stock tanks or reservoirs? Or maybe it's just keeping an eye on a remote ranch location. When you stop and you think about it and you start to calculate the cost of your time, fuel, and miles on your vehicles, you're going to scare yourself. But there really is a very simple and a reassuring solution, and it's called Barn Owl. Barn Owl off-grid cameras and smart alerts provide you that assurance, and there's no question it is a time and a money saver. From anywhere at any time, no Wi-Fi or power needed. Build your off-grid camera system today at barnowl.tech. Real-time awareness starts here. Always know with Barn Owl.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Geld-V and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Geld-V and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Geld-V and Balancer genetics.
It's decision time. Which heifers are you keeping? Which are you selling? Make sort gate decisions easier with genomic EPDs for your commercial females. Back your instincts with Inherit Select from Zoetis. Feel more confident knowing you're selecting heifers with the potential to be the most productive and profitable in your herd. Keep the best. Sell the rest. Zoetis makes it easy. Order free supplies today so you can easily collect tissue samples when you work cattle this fall. Visit beefgenetics.com/working ranch to get started.
Well, the latest issue, the September-October issue of Working Ranch Magazine is out. I wanted to point out a few articles for you in case you missed them. But on page 20 under That's an Improvement, Gentry Sims is the writer on this one, talking about calving barns. She starts off right the bat there, talking about for some operations, you just have to calve in those tougher times of the year. She talks about how to set up and things to keep in mind when you have a calving barn in there. So a great article there by Gentry. That starts on page 20. Then if you flip over to page 30 in this issue, Rancher's Journal, just beautiful photography, a great story there, great writing there. Vanessa Ould talking about her husband and their operation there that they manage and work for a community pasture, managing on 23,000 acres up in Saskatchewan, and just a great story there. Very interesting, as like I said before, some great photography in that story as well. And then finally, don't forget in this September-October issue is also when we have the Cattle Care Catalog as part of that. That starts on page 38 as they cover all of the products that are in our industry available, covering things from nutrition to prevention to treatment, as well as comfort and growth. So check out the Cattle Care Catalog as well, starting on page 38 of this latest issue, September and October issue of Working Ranch Magazine. By the way, if you don't have a subscription to Working Ranch Magazine, it's pretty easy to get started. If you go to their website at workingranchmag.com, you can get your subscription started here today. And I did want to talk about just a couple items that we're going to be having on upcoming shows here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. How many of you ever heard of Johne's disease? Well, you might have heard about it. It's something that I'd heard about, just didn't know a whole lot about. We're going to be exploring that and where that's at in the industry. Also, have you heard about the potential of zinc supplement in cattle prior to transport, helping them out? Well, we're going to be talking about that as well in upcoming shows, so be sure to tune in here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. By the way, if you missed something here, it's pretty easy to go. If you go to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com, not only can you download today's show, but you can also look back over our library of shows and download any of them or share them. And also don't be afraid to leave us comments, as we find that helpful as well. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Now, if you'd like to get a hold of me, maybe you have a story or a topic you'd like us to cover, get a hold of me, let me know. You can send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us this week. Tune in next week at the same time, same place. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.